Well, thanks, Neil. I'm Craig, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm really grateful to be here tonight. Thankful for the opportunity to be able to share my story. This is a privilege. The longer I stay sober, the more I see it that way. I was terrified of this thing, early on, because I just didn't know how I would share all of my mess. And honestly, I think part of that has to do with the fact that I hadn't really gotten into the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous yet. So sharing my story, it was just the mess of my life, my drinking and addiction. And so there's not a lot of hope to be gleaned from that. And so tonight I'm going to try my very best to be brief and concise in talking about what brought me here, and try to focus more on what's helped me stay here and what's kept me here, because I think that is really the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, the fact that, my sobriety date. My sobriety date is August 18th of 2014. So I just celebrated 9 years last month. And I feel very humbled to consider what it took to bring this person, me, to this stage right now, considering everything that has gone on in my life. So very privileged. I want to do something. I don't know if it's ever been done here, but there were several people with less than 30 days, and my sponsor taught me that when I speak, I should give out a big book. So I want to do that, if that's all right with you. So for the people that said that they were here with less than 30 days, is there anyone with less than 10 days? If you'd be willing to raise your hand. Okay. That one person? Okay. I have a big book for you that I would like to give you. Do you have a big book? Okay. Is there anyone here that doesn't have a big book that would like one? That has? Okay, Lyle, right? That's your name? Come on up. I do that because that was done in the very first meeting that I ever went to of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's one of the only things I remember about that meeting, that first meeting that I went to. That meeting took place in the cafeteria of the University of Utah's Neuropsychiatric Institute. Uni is what it's called, up in Salt Lake. And I was there, and I was not in good shape. I was in terrible shape, to be honest. And I'll get to the story of what led me there. Quickly, I'll just give a quick kind of brief summary of who I am and where I came from. I was born in Price, Utah. I'm a Utah boy. My parents are here with me tonight. I think this might be my dad's first official AA meeting, and my mom has come to a meeting with me before, but I feel very honored to have them here. And I'm still going to try to be honest with them here. And be real with you about what it is that this disease has caused in my life, and now the joy that I feel being in recovery. But I was born in Price, Utah, to these fine people, and they were the best parents that they could be, and they were terrific. It is by no fault of theirs that I ever needed rooms like these. They raised me with love, and they cared about me. They gave me faith, and they really tried their best. When I was a young kid in grade school, one day I started limping on the playground, and I didn't know what was going on, just a kid. And I had this limp and this pain in my leg, and so I dealt with it for a couple of days, I think, and then I went and finally someone noticed how badly I was limping, and they said, what's going on, Craig? And I said, I don't know. And we went to the doctor and found out that I had a condition that was developing, which was called Legg-Calvé-Perthes disease of my hip, my left hip, which happens in kids when they're growing at a certain age. Their hip doesn't form correctly, and so they have a lot of pain, and that's what was happening with me. Long story short, I ended up going through a series of doctor's visits, orthopedists, and then I was placed in this brace that strapped onto both of my thighs. I was in the first grade, and it strapped onto both of my thighs, and it had a metal bar in the middle, and I had to walk. It was their attempt to try to correct what was happening in my hip socket, but I had to try to walk like that, and this won't be good on the recording, but you can imagine trying to walk with a metal bar in between your legs. So yeah, I just had to walk like this, kind of sort of like Forrest Gump, a little bit. And that was a key moment in my life that started to sort of develop me and my character and who I was as a child. I remember one thing back then. I became ultra sensitive to how others looked at me. And I wouldn't have thought back then that was a big deal. I figured probably everyone else had that same thing, that they looked around a room and were analyzing how they were being viewed and what others might be thinking of them. But I was a child, and I started to develop this severe self-consciousness, and I now know that's not particularly healthy, but that was the case. And so I wore this brace for a couple of years. My hip condition that brace didn't really fix anything in particular. I still walked with a limp. After a couple of years, I was able to get out of that brace. My loving mom talked the doctor, I think, into it, because she knew how heartbroken I was that I had to wear this thing. And I was teased, and made fun of a few times, and whether it was a few times or 100, it wouldn't have mattered. I was just a very sensitive soul, and so I had that, but it didn't really slow me down. I played sports. I really enjoyed sports, especially baseball. I was able to play baseball all through high school. That was my sport. Really enjoyed it. I couldn't play football because of my hip condition, but I excelled at baseball. And leading up in high school to my junior year of baseball, which is a big deal, I was in talks with some college recruiters, and I was having a very good time playing baseball. I was a pitcher, and I went on. Like I said, I grew up here, so we had a snow day in the middle of the winter, my junior year, and baseball season hadn't started yet. And I went out with my friends and I went down, tubing down a hill, and I went up, and a friend landed on me just as I landed on the ground, and I separated my right shoulder, which happened to be my pitching shoulder, my arm that I threw with. And I can't explain how much I felt like my life was over at that moment. I truly loved the game of baseball so much that I was devastated that had happened. I separated my shoulder, which required surgery. I knew that, I would never be able to throw the same, and I had high aspirations of what I could do on the baseball field, and so that was devastating. And but for those of you who are here, you'll hear something very unique in this part of the story. After I went to surgery, actually before surgery, they took off all of my winter gear and they saw what my shoulder looked like. And the doctor came in with this beautiful syringe and said, "You're going to be okay." And he gave me a shot of, it's probably morphine. I don't know what it was, but it made me feel okay for that moment. And even though I was in tears, and my tears were more about how sorry I felt for myself because of this injury that I knew was going to really set me back. And anyway, I rehabbed that injury, got on pain pills. I think the pain medication that I took at that time, I don't say this lightly, it might have saved my life. I was extremely depressed. I was very, very down because of that, what I considered sort of like a tragedy, And I started taking these beautiful chalky white and yellow pain pills, and they fixed something inside of me that I just can't even explain what it did. It fixed something internal, and it made me okay. And later on, I would drink with a cousin of mine, and alcohol made me feel that same way, And what I discovered in these chemicals, in alcohol, drugs, in my teenage years, is that I could be okay regardless of what my circumstances were if I had those things. And so even though I didn't have a lot of opportunity, I wasn't part of a crowd that partied a lot, and I didn't really like the social aspect of that anyway. I knew that I wanted to do it any chance that I could. And so, I made a lot of mental notes. I need to have this in my life as much and as often as I possibly can. And so that's how it started. Fast forward, I ended up playing baseball. No big deal. I graduated, decided to go on a 2-year LDS mission. I served a mission in Mexico. I came back from that mission and went to school, got married, and when I was going to school in Southern Utah University down in Cedar, and I was really excelling in my classes in chemistry. In high school, I was kind of like I slacked off a lot, I didn't really commit myself to my studies and things, and so I didn't do particularly well. But in college, I really focused on that, and anything, as I'm sure it's probably true for many of us in this room, if we have a tendency to obsess on things, and so I could obsess on studying and getting good grades, and so I became a really good student, and I discovered that I really liked chemistry, and so this is going to be interesting to those of you who are here, and you know why I'm here. So that when I tell you that I decided to go into pharmacy as a career, that that's funny now, but I didn't see it as a real issue then, you know. But I'd had these little, you know, these little red flags in the back of my mind, but I chose to go into pharmacy and study pharmacy. And so I graduated down there, and then I got into pharmacy school at Creighton University in Omaha, and I went to pharmacy school. And in my third year of pharmacy school, I started having a lot of pain in that hip from my childhood hip problem, and I started seeking out medical help for that. And I should say, you know, anytime that I had a chance to change my mental state through chemicals or substances, I would. And even though I was married and I was portraying myself as a certain person, you know, a religious person, man of faith, anytime that I had an opportunity to drink or to use drugs, I would do it. And so I started to get prescriptions from the doctor legally for a while. and I was like a master manipulator, you know. I was, like I said, in my third year of pharmacy school. So I knew all of the things to say to get not only in the doctor's good graces, but to get their little prescription pad out, and then hopefully to have them write a prescription for what I wanted, because I knew what opiates, especially how they made me feel and what they did to me. So I began taking them, not as prescribed, obviously, to say the least, and then I would run out, and then as the story goes, it just snowballed from there and got really bad. I was in pharmacy school, and I was prescribed Oxycontin and several other things. Probably shouldn't concentrate on that particular, you know, specifically, but anyway, I went from being physically dependent on these substances to being a full-blown addict right around the time that I was graduating pharmacy school. Terrible time. And then I had this problem with my leg, with my hip in addition. So I always had a built-in justification for why I needed these things. And that's how I began my pharmacy career. I took a job at the University of Utah after graduating, and those poor suckers are the ones who hired me. I mean, I say that with such regret, you know, that I took a job up there. It was my dream job after pharmacy school, and I was a good pharmacist, actually, but I was one of us. I was an alcoholic, and I'm an addict. So things crumbled very quickly. I went through a period where I would. So I still hadn't stolen medication at this point. It all, you know, I was like a junkie, I guess, through sort of legal means, you know, but just manipulating doctors. But there was a day where I was coming off of that, and maybe some of you know what that feels like. It's the most horrific, awful thing ever. And I was in the middle of my shift in the pharmacy. I had just told my doctor, my prescribing doctor, that I had a problem. You know, like, and later come to find out this is what a lot of us do. We get honest just enough to get us in real trouble, you know. And so I got honest with this doctor who was my prescriber, and he said, well, obviously I can't give you any more, you know. So he cuts me off, and I was going like through full-blown withdrawals from the drugs that I was on, and I'm in the pharmacy, and this is where, you know, we talk a lot in AA about standing at the turning point. This is one of my first turning point moments. I was standing at a turning point, and I had a decision to make, and the decision that I made was that those pills on that shelf will make me feel better, and that was all it came down to. And so I found a way to begin stealing opiate pain medication, and in super large quantities, and started to tumble downhill very quickly. At one point, I had 3 kids at this time. I was trying to keep my marriage together, and you know, I think addiction, alcoholism, is such a, it says in the book, it's a cunning, baffling, powerful thing. Man, there's got to be so many more adjectives to describe it. It's like, I heard a guy, I used to take a meeting into Foothill Detox and Treatment Facility, the Utah County facility. I took a meeting in there for a few years. It's a huge part of what helped me get 9 years of recovery and sobriety. And anyway, this guy came in and he described addiction. It's like juggling these things, a family, you know, a career, and a chainsaw, you know. and it's like when you're juggling a few things and one of those things is a chainsaw, you're going to pay a lot of attention to the chainsaw every time that it comes around. You're going to make sure that that chainsaw doesn't drop, or that it doesn't cut your arm off when it comes falling down the next time. So the other things in turn, of course, are going to fall as a result. And so that's what started to happen in my life. My addiction, my alcoholism really started to take pieces of me. I started to do things that, you know, like that I never imagined myself doing. So I was stealing from my employer and justifying that somehow. But I was terrified at all moments, in fear that I would be discovered and, you know, hauled off or locked up or whatever. And then I tried, there's a part in the big book where it's in A Vision for You, and it's when Bill Wilson meets Dr. Bob for the first time, and then Bill Wilson's like recounting this experience of when he met Dr. Bob, and he says that he met this friend, and his friend had tried many avenues of escape, and he knew that he was somehow abnormal, but he didn't know what it meant to be an alcoholic. But he had tried many avenues of escape, and that was me. I began trying these avenues of escape to try to fix me, you know, because I knew that I was broken. I felt like I was broken, and I thought that all of these half measures would do it. And so one of them was I started prescribing myself methadone through a physician that I worked with. They obviously didn't know that was happening. Thankfully, that, what's it called? in the courts. All of this, I'm clear. I'm 9 years, so none of this is going to come back and get me now. I've dealt with all this stuff, so I can talk about it openly. I started writing prescriptions for myself for methadone because I was going, I was playing God, and I was going to prescribe myself a drug that would get me off of this stuff, right? So I would write a taper. I was going to taper down off of it. And how I survived that period of time, I just began abusing it like I did the other stuff. And then I failed at that. And then that's what led me into uni for the first time is my wife, now ex-wife, she discovered that I had these pills and I had no explanation for them, and I was, acting like a zombie at home and at all times, and she finally just knew that she couldn't put the pieces together because I was lying so much about what was happening, and finally she confronted me, and I said, I need help. And my first half measure was I checked myself into a detox at uni up there, but under the guise that I needed to get off of the pain medication that I was taking because I'd had my hip replaced throughout the course of this, and that of course was a lie. I wasn't taking medication that was legal for me to take. It was what I was stealing. And so anyhow, I end up in detox, go to my first AA meeting in the cafeteria at uni, and I meet these people, and I was so sick. I was coming off of methadone, probably like 200 milligrams of methadone a day, probably. I don't know what I was taking. It was enough to kill a horse, and I had developed such a tolerance that I was just a sick man, and I had sores on me. I was unwell, and here I am in this detox facility, and I met these AA people, and they were like super happy, And I walked into this cafeteria, this AA meeting that I knew nothing about, and these AAs were like, there was a guy taking a cake for like 10 years, and they're cheering, and I was in my pajamas and slippers because I had been throwing up for several days. I was really in a terrible shape, and I was judging them for how excited they were for their recovery. And I just thought, I need to get away from all of you, and I'll figure this out. That was like my battle cry, I will figure this out. My case is different, and I'll figure this out. Give me enough time, I'll figure this out. So the great I am, that's what us alcoholics, we face. That is our biggest enemy when we come here, is that we are sure that we can, of ourselves, create a solution to the problem that we created. And that was me. And so I continued to spiral out of control. That was my lowest, definitely physical point of absolute addiction, and alcohol is mixed in here. I hate to talk so much about, I definitely used a lot more drugs than I drank, to be completely forthright. But anytime I drank for the same reasons, to blot out me, because I didn't like who I was very much. And that's hard to say in front of my parents, because they raised a young man who should have liked who he was, But I didn't like me,
And so I abused these substances, of course, and they say that we're most dangerous when we get into when we develop an attitude of indifference, like we just don't care, And that was the point that I found myself at. I've hit two major bottoms in my using and drinking, and that first one was what took me to that detox facility. And I still vividly remember my ex-wife. I had my little daughter, Sonora, who's now 12 years old. And I remember she was a baby in a cradle, and my ex-wife dropped me off at this detox facility and drove away. And I remember looking out the window, watching her carry our daughter in her car seat to the van and drive away. I still remember what that feels like, and just feeling that absolute demoralization that we talk about in here that brings us here. And then that wasn't enough for me. I wish so many times that my story, I used to regret that my story didn't have a stop at a certain point when it would have made logical sense to be done. But I went on several more months. I got back into the pharmacy and started stealing pills again. I was prescribed a medication called Suboxone, which some of you are probably familiar with. It's supposed to help you get off of this stuff. And anyway, it didn't help me get off of this stuff. I just began abusing it and other things, and eventually it came to the point where one day I was changing my little girl's diaper, and I had a moment of clarity, and I'm talking way too much about the mess. I said I wasn't going to do that. I had a moment of clarity, and I saw that God wanted this little girl to have a father, and that I wasn't going to be her father if I continued down the path that I was on. And so I had a surrender at that moment, and I called my employer the next day, and I told him what had been going on, and I got fired from my job, and I got into treatment. I went to a treatment facility up in Oregon for health professionals, and they were going to fix me. And they helped show me the light, honestly, but the light is Alcoholics Anonymous. They showed me to the light, and eventually I would come here. So I went to treatment up there, came back, and got divorced, because when you are in a relationship with an alcoholic or a drug addict, you begin to doubt everything that they say. And when they're away for any given amount of time, you especially start to doubt everything that they've ever said to you. And so I think I gave my ex-wife just enough time to herself to realize that just how dishonest I had been with her, I hadn't been unfaithful or anything like that, but I had been so dishonest, and I had put her through hell. And so she wanted a divorce, and I was devastated, and I didn't think that was a very good way to start my recovery. But I tried, and I scraped myself up off the ground, and I had 4 kids at this time we had 4 kids together, and I'm trying to do my best, and I ended up getting a job back in pharmacy with the support of the State Board of Pharmacy. They were helping me. In health professions, I'll tell you, in the state of Utah, they're very good about helping you get a second chance. They're not super excited about having you have a third chance. a third chance. They do not like that. You got a second chance, and you better take advantage of it. So I got back in the pharmacy about 6 months in. It just was all too much, and I relapsed, and I started using different substance, soma, and I abused it to an ungodly level, and it could have and probably should have killed me, how much I was taking of it. And I don't know why I'm here, you know. I'm very humbled. If I ever, I tell the guys that I sponsor, man, you ever need a moment, you need gratitude, you just sit and think about why you're here and that other guy isn't. And you know who that other guy or that other woman is. I've met him in here. We have a friend, Brian, you know. Our friend Brian, I met him in Foothill several years back, and he's not with us anymore. And my friend Todd, who I met in AA, he's not with us anymore. And so gratitude is always at our fingertips in Alcoholics Anonymous. We just have to remember what our story is, and to not take that for granted. So I ended up crashing and burning again, and I came to that fateful morning, August 18th, 2014, which is my sobriety date. I woke up delirious and terrible shape. A coworker was calling me because there was a line at the pharmacy. People that needed me to be there to open the door, and I wasn't. And so she came to my house, and I couldn't even answer the phone. I was in such awful shape from drinking and using, and she took me to the emergency room, and my little brother, Preston, he sort of, he's an administrator at the hospital where I was working, you know. He helped me get this job. He helped me get back on my feet. There's my little brother who I just admire. I admire him so much, and he's there, and he had gotten the call that we were coming and that I was in terrible shape, and he caught me in the parking lot. He caught me and this coworker, and he said, "Just give us a minute." And I walked out of the car. He was trying to decide if I needed medical help. I said no. You know, like us alcoholics and addicts, if we're standing, we're good enough, you know. The fact that I made it through the night, I can't explain how that happened, but anyway, I was there, and there I was at another turning point, and my little brother, who has always done the right things, he looked at me and he said, "How much longer can you go on like this?" And I said, took a deep breath, and I said, "I can't." And I surrendered. And I had been going to AA for those couple of years while I was trying to stumble and be a divorced dad and be in recovery, and I couldn't do it, and I relapsed, and I was done, you know. I was out of options. I was out of lies, and there was God right in that instant. That God was there to meet me in that moment, and I surrendered, and great things began to happen in my life after that. Well, they weren't that great, actually. A lot of bad things happen after you surrender, but it's a different bad. It's different bad. It's not the same bad that was going on before. I offered myself to God. I truly did a step one in that moment. Step one in Alcoholics Anonymous is as we say, is the step that you have to take completely, and I took it in that instant. I did not know what my life would look like moving forward, if I would ever work again in this career that I had worked so hard to get. I didn't care whether I did. All I cared is that I wanted to live, and I wanted to feel free again and not shackled to, this bondage, that self-imposed bondage that we create. And so that's where I found myself. I made another extremely difficult call to my employer, who said, man, I just talked to him last week, or a couple weeks ago on my sobriety date. I called him and made one of my very last amends that I had to make. I had a couple of amends that I was really holding on to because I had so much shame attached to these amends that I needed to make. And my former boss, Lonnie, he was one of the last amends that I had to make. And I called him a couple of weeks ago and talked to him about that day, and I told him how sorry I was that I was unwell and that he put his trust in me, and that I didn't come through for him, and that he ended up facing some hard things with like his license as a result of trusting me, because everything came down and I faced legal charges. And we can't run away from the consequences of our actions. We get here in AA, it's kind of interesting. We pat each other on the butt and we say, you're going to be okay. I promise. Look in my eyes. You're going to be okay. But you got to turn and face, or I'm going to turn with you and face these problems that you've been running from. Man, it's terrifying when we get here and we're new. And that's what a sponsor did with me, is he said, we're going to face these issues that you have one by one, and we're going to deal with them. And I met an old crotchety guy who I knew from years before. I used to drop my kids off at a meeting, or I used to drop my kids off with my ex-wife because she had moved to Provo and I was living out of town. And then I would go to a meeting, sometimes half loaded, sometimes not. But I met this guy Tony with one leg, who he's well known around here, and makes everyone really upset because he has really strong opinions. But I'll tell you what, that guy was there on the day that I needed a man to show me love, and he showed me love, and he took me through the first 5 steps, and then he handed me off to another sponsor. And I've had several sponsors in Alcoholics Anonymous, which I really believe that has been one of the saving graces for me personally, is that I've always had a sponsor, someone that I could be 100% honest with. I don't retain the truth from my sponsor. I tell my sponsor how I'm feeling. And that's what I require of the men that I sponsor today too. All I say to them is, if you're not doing well, tell me that you're not doing well. Like, don't feed me a line of bullshit. If you aren't doing well, then tell me. Because we can't work on something that we aren't willing to address. And so I began being honest with the sponsor. I started working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started to develop a relationship with God, a new relationship that was different than my old relationship with God. I had an old relationship with God that had a lot to do with the way that I was raised in the church around here. And that relationship has grown and is so important to me today. It really is. I get to show, I have a little boy. I got remarried about 5 years, a little over 5 years ago. I got remarried, and I have a son that's 3, Cameron, and a little baby girl who's 10 months old. And life is so sweet. I hate putting a bow on a story of, so much hardship and everything, but I just want to say that this program has changed me in ways that I would never have believed that it could. I came here very broken and looking at my shoes and still that frightened kid, in the brace. I felt like I was that kid in the brace in elementary school again. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you people started to help me to lift my chin up a little bit, Look up, Craig. There's a world out here, and I had achieved these things in my life. Like my career, I worked very hard for, and I was very proud of that, but I didn't feel like I had amounted to much. But AA has shown me that I do matter, and that's a good feeling. The steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, they start with surrender, and then they help us to tap into a relationship with a higher power who honestly can carry you through whatever you're facing. I can say that with absolute surety, because that power has brought me through very difficult things in sobriety. And then you get to start to repair the mess of your life like I did. And all of that can be taken, can be mended. It really can. I can't tell you how that's going to look for you. My friend Robert, he would always say, if I could give you 5 years sobriety, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't want to rob you of the experience of living at those 5 years of sobriety. And there's so much growth that can happen here, and I'm a believer. I'm like an AA cheerleader now. It's a pretty awesome place to be. I'm not ashamed of my story. I love to share with other people where I've come from and what my journey has been. And I just want to say that for the new people, if you're in that pit, the most important skill that you can develop here in Alcoholics Anonymous is the ability to ask for help. And you can't do it alone. And we're here to help you. And that's what AA is all about. Started with 2 men trying to help one another, and it continues today. And I'm so grateful to be a part of it. And thank you for letting me share.